donors, government clients, and practitioners. The series offer monthly sessions on a variety of topics related to RBF and OBA in different sectors. And if you're new to the concept of results-based financing and output-based aid, make sure to check us out on our website, gpoba.org, and at our community of practice. So today we will be discussing about social impact bonds, also known as Pay for Success in the United States or social benefit bonds in Australia. The concept picked up especially in the recent years as an alternative to traditional approaches to address social challenges. Some of you may have come across development impact bonds. This is a term used for social impact bonds that are implemented in low and middle income countries. The particular focus of today is the Youth Employment Project that is being designed by the Belgian Public Employment Agency and funded by the European Social Fund. And to talk about it, we have connected to the webinar Jan Dawe, Benedict Waters, and Vlad Kvacha. I will introduce the presenter, who is Jan Dawe. He is the project manager responsible for the initiation and implementation of the Social Impact Bond pilot, which is a first for the Public Employment Agency in Flanders. He is also spearheading the development of a legal and financing framework to implement social impact bonds, including accessing funding sources such as the European Social Fund. And he will be the one talking today. We will also have two discussants. One is Benedict Waters, who is the director at the Flemish Ministry of Labour and Social Economy, where he is responsible for innovation, impact evaluation, and methodology at the European Social Fund Department. The European Social Fund is also the funder of the first SIB in Flanders. In addition, Benedict led the European Union-wide Community of Practice on results-based management for 5 years, where he contributed to the European Commission's new toolbox on quality of public administration. And lastly, but not least, we have connected Vladimir Kvacha, who serves as the head of the European Social Fund Evaluation Team and Director General of the EU Fund section at the Czech Ministry of Labour and Social Affairs. He has been actively involved in the community of practice on results-based management, advocating for the principle of evidence-based policy for the European structural and investment funds in the Czech government. So, in what follows, Jan will start the presentation, and he will provide an overview of the SIP mechanism and will tell us about their project, from the structure of the project to challenges faced during the preparation. This project is due to be launched in the fall of 2016. Before I give the floor to Jan, please be advised that we have reserved a Q&A session after the presentation, and you can type your questions and your comments during the presentation in the chat box, which is located at the right of your screen. We will make sure to address all your questions after the presentation. So Jan, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you, Inga, for the introduction. Welcome everyone to the seminar around social impact bonds. First of all, I want to start with 3 points to remind about social impact bonds at the end of this seminar, and that is that the social impact bond is a new public-private partnership. It's a risk outsourcing system where we only pay for success, and this only for innovative and risk-holding projects. Service providers are secured from pressure, so they can work in their own methodology. So, what is a social impact bond? Social impact bond is a multi-stakeholder partnership between government, investor, and a service provider. It's a contracted relationship which is proposed to reduce a social problem and help this to scale it if successful. In fact, it's an arrangement where a better outcome can be delivered at lower cost for the government. So, If a government wants to attack a social problem, they will gather with the investors and service providers. So investors can pre-finance service provider to resolve the social problem. They will find a target group. The government will evaluate if it's successful, yes or no. If it's successful, and only if it's successful, the government will refund the investors' investments plus a return on investment. So it's not only a one-way direction action between government and investors for the finance and investor service providers for the financial issue. It's also an action where the service providers will deliver a solution for a social problem, but also the investors will be involved with to resolve the problems, the social problems, and they will be active to solve the problem by putting available their network and giving the service providers platforms to resolve the problems. So, to illustrate, first of all, one more thing, why should stakeholders participate? What are the benefits for the government? For the government, benefits are to get better results and at less tax-paying expenses. For investors, they get a social return and a reasonable financial return on the return on investment. And for the service providers, they have a pathway to gain scale to grow their businesses. So everybody is winning by this successful method. To illustrate how it works, I have a rough budget estimate to compare unemployment costs and cost and benefits by employment, because the VDAB is that's the core business we're active on. So, for example, if we have 140 job seekers, and we know that the social cost of one job seeker a year is about 30,000 euros, then the social cost over 1 year for those 140 job seekers will be 4.2 million. If we don't take care of them and we're not helping them to get a job, this will be a repeatedly cost for the society. So if we take, for example, a project for 3 years, for the duration of the project, the costs, if we don't take care of the job seekers, will be 12.6 million. Now, estimated the social impact operation costs. 140 job seekers guidance. I counted 3,000 euro for each job seeker, and that's the average cost in VDAB. It will cost 420,000 euros. The consultancy cost to for being intermediary will be on, I count 100,000. An independent evaluator to evaluate the success ratio gives a total of 600,000 euros, plus a return on investment in function of the investment and the measuring of the social gain, makes that at the end the government, the state will gain about 12 million euros, and did only for 140 job seekers. The success of this social impact bond method started in 2010 in the UK, with the first example in the prison to prevent recidivism, and the social savings were estimated in lowering prison costs, court costs, judges, state security, and so on. So the social savings were measurable. So 2012 it went over to the US and also to Europe. In Europe there is a active social impact bonds, 4 in the Netherlands, 1 in Germany and 1 in Belgium. Now, it expands exponentially. The first few years it was concentrated in the UK, but from 2012 on it was exponentially among the world. It's expanded worldwide. At the moment there are about 50 active social impact bonds projects worldwide, but we have knowledge that there are a few hundred in development. If we look at the active social impact bonds by sector, we see that 18 of them are in social welfare, 4 in crime justice, 3 in education, and 13 in employment. Another big advantage of this mechanism and the new extra is the new extra finance injection is the outcome-based commissioning unlocks that expanded focus. What does it mean? That is due to the cost cutting, governments are doomed to go for the try and test traditional solutions, which result in mostly intervention and crisis management of social problems. Now, thanks to the new capital created with the social impact bonds, innovation can be applied with entrepreneurial solution in prevention of social problems. So the focus will be expanded. Now, a little more about our story. About a year ago, VDAB started to move in the direction of the social impact bonds. We started with a preliminary study. In June, we had to convince the board of direction to participate, to take a role in the first social impact bonds for Flanders. In August, we applied for an European Social Funds financial support to develop the first social impact bonds in Flanders. Now we are at the point to concretize the project. First, we had to find and decide which social problem we would attack. Of course, our core business is unemployment. It was not easy to find a target group that we do not cover yet. We already put a lot of effort in approaching a lot of groups, but one particular unemployed group are the needs, not educated, employed or trained young people. We have already put a lot of effort and energy in those groups, but without significant results. So a new approach would be desirable, but not with our tax money. So the SIP mechanism came into the picture. We decided to focus on the needs in Antwerp, because the number of needs in Antwerp is more than 30% higher than in the rest of Flanders. In fact, there are 7,123 measured needs in Antwerp last year, and they are divided in officially on the labor market, still no job seeking guidance started, the dropouts, officially not on the labor market, never in trajectory, and the job seeking guidance followed but no results. This results in 56.4% that is not even looking for a job of these young people. And 1 out of 3 is completely off the radar, not known by us or welfare. And there is more. Some youths are no need, but still 5,576 youths are likely potential needs. Problematic truants, we have students without study points, job seekers in guidance, and not eligible students in adult education. Makes that we have a big amount of young people that we can work with, but we cannot attend them. It's not easy to find the way through them. So what are our objectives with the social impact bonds project? We did 100 trainings and matches of needs a year, and we plan to do that for about 5 years. 70% outflow to long-term employment, aftercare for the risk group, reduction of the costs of living wages and benefits, agile young people with correct work attitudes and future perspectives, and social savings on edge problems for the NEET youth. Of course, filling vacancies by NEET youth is one of our main business. How will we do it? Well, we will introduce the social impact bonds in Flanders. The VDAB will represent the government. We are now negotiating with investor and social providers in the region of Antwerp to establish and put in action the social impact bonds, to start working with the needs. An academically independent evaluator is contacted to evaluate the results to finalize the project. So to develop the SIP, we had some issues and obstacles. So we are scanning the limits of a few questions that we are asking ourselves, obstacles, issues that we have to conquer, and I would like to share them with all of you. So the first one is the legal regulation of the social impact bonds participants. And then I'm talking about the law on public procurement. We are obliged to public tenders because we are working from the government, and it's not easy to arrange all this to put this in action, because if we want to attack a problem, a social problem, we're gathering with investors, with service providers, and we create some new ideas. But at the end, when we are ready to go over in action, we need to put it in a public procurement, and that is not easy because there will be other participants, stakeholders, possible stakeholders who wants to participate. Second of all, labor market stakeholders, support for the social impact bonds concept. Who will, can, or may I, which role? We are investigating the possibilities of stakeholders. Is there an interest from the investors market, or the service providers interested to work with this formula, with this mechanism? That's a question we have to ask ourselves. Third, the policy areas, Flemish and federal. It's in Belgium. It's complicated because we have the Flemish part, we have the Walloon part, we have Brussels, and all different departments. They are responsible for different departments. So it's complicated than in other countries. Assignment of concerned government agencies and department. Which mission and task goes to who? It will cover more than only labor departments if we put the needs to work, but will be the other departments, will they also be interested to participate in the return on investment they have made for their department? That's a question we have to ask ourselves. The effectiveness of the applied approach. Is it effective because it's new, or is it effective because it's work? Even so, the CSF for the applied approach, does it work because it's innovative, or is the success due to the context or other factors? And then at last, the possible redistribution of the labor market stakeholders. Who will take which role if the social impact bonds will be introduced at large scale? That's a question we have to ask ourselves. So with that, I want to finish the presentation and go over to questions and remarks. Please, back to you, Inga.
Again, thank you very much for the presentation. Much appreciated. We have questions coming in, and while more are coming in, we're sifting through. I would like to defer for a minute to Benedict, who is representing here the funder of the social impact bonds in Flanders, and ask him if he could provide us the perspective of them as the funder, why they decided to go ahead with the social impact bond project, and what does he think is the advantages as compared to the traditional funding that the European structural funds have done so far.
Okay, I managed to unmute myself. Thanks for inviting me to the discussion. Does everybody hear me? Yes? Okay.
Yes,
So it's important to understand a little bit how the European Social Fund works in Flanders. So we have a part of our program which is there to support innovation, and this is the part that is funding Ian's project. So for us, we are not directly funding or setting up ourselves the social impact bond mechanism. We are allowing Ian to actually demonstrate what it would look like if we would ever want to support social impact bonds. So that's a slightly different idea than just supporting social impact bonds. So for us it's a demonstration project. So we want to learn if this is something that can be interesting for us, what the advantages are, what the disadvantages are, the difficulties also in setting it up, limitations perhaps, and then we in the future are going to think about whether we will put this into our arsenal of ways to fund mostly more innovative ways of dealing with societal challenges. So it fits in a bigger picture of us constantly thinking about how we can deal and tackle in the best way with the challenges that we have in Flanders.
Thank you, Benedict. I find it important that more and more funders out there give it a chance to social impact bonds, but other results-based payment financing instruments, which are proving now that placing the incentives in the right place deliver more and more quicker the outputs that we're looking for. Back to Jan. Jan, although the social impact bonds are a revenue instrument, a lot has been written so far, and one of the main criticisms of SIBs has been the difficulty to measure the outcomes of the schemes and to calculate objectively the payments to investors. And there's a concern that investors stand to gain a lot from social programs. How is your project dealing with this? First, how are you calculating the payment per youth that goes through the program and then is employed, and how are you making sure that it's as objective as possible?
Sure that it's objective. We have an external independent evaluator who evaluates the results. In turn, if for us to calculate the price per youth that is in training, we measure it at we have our own training and our own tenders, so we can measure it by them. We can compare by what we are doing right now. And for the refund of the investors, that is something that we are now negotiating with the investors, on which base and which method the payment will be going. So that's not clear yet.
So this is something to follow with you and see how you will complete the design and how the payments will be calculated and allocated. That's good. We have more questions coming in. There's one from Shahina. And she is wondering if the approach would work with a change in government, and what is the sovereign guarantee? Jan and Benedict and Vlad, any of you, if you can talk about this, what are the guarantees that the scheme will be in place and will work properly even with government changes? Can you either of you hear? Ian, do you want to take a first stab at the question?
Yes, first step. That's an issue we have to discuss because it's legislature. We don't know if politically that's the problem in Belgium. It's politically not clear in which way they will be involved. That's something we are trying now to start the social impact bond from the bottom to top, and we created one to find out if it works, and we hope to get the political involvement when it's successful, and then we will see how they will refund at the end. But for our project, I give us the project will take 5 years plus calculation for the long-term job seeking. So that will give me some more years to figure this out. But maybe Vlad or Benedict can also interfere.
Of course, this is Vladimir speaking. Well, from my experience from the government, of course, governmental changes may change a lot of things, but in the end, the promises of the previous government have to be kept if they are part of an agreement. Of course, the general tendency towards social impact bonds can change, but those who are once running have to be properly ended, in my opinion. So. Of course, the continuity of, for example, rolling out a pilot into more into the policy of the broader scope can be difficult, but that's my opinion.
Yeah, good. Benedict, I'm not sure if you wanted to say anything to the effect of government change and how the scheme may be affected.
Yes, I can say something about it, because from our perspective with the European Social Fund we have a multi-annual program, so once we start to embed mechanisms in that which we say will be part of how we run the program, then basically that's a deal. So because this is organized also at the EU level and has to be agreed at the EU level. So we are not there at the moment. So that's thinking about the future. We don't have the mechanism at the moment inserted into our way of working. But if that would be the case, then we have 7 to 8 year programs that would at least provide security, let's say, or a guarantee that you just don't get disrupted because there's a change of government, because that's not the normal way of doing things. That would have to be then renegotiated with the European Commission and so on. So because we are multi-annual, we can take a slightly longer term perspective sometimes, going over changes in government. The only question is for us, of course, is in what capacity we would actually be involved with the European Social Fund. Would that be as the outcome funder or the investor? In principle, both could be possible, but that's not at the moment. That's one of the things that we want to discuss and think about through Ian's project also.
Yes, thank you, Benedict, for your perspective as well. We have more questions in here, and there's one from Vladimir, and he is wondering, well, at the beginning, Jan, you pointed out the need to protect the service providers from pressure. and why you see this important, and how will you take care of this? Take care of the fact that the investors will not move the performance risk directly to service providers, and that's if you got it right. Can you, Jan, please address this?
Yes, that we see some differences between what's happening in the UK and what's happening in the US. In the UK, there are social involved investors who have the same propose the same targets. And in the US, the financial market went on it, and it's quite not the same effect. But if I'm not mistaken, Benedict can give a very good example from something that happened in UK, where the pressure is, when the pressure is not put on the service providers, the results become much bigger, and I think that's one of the rules that we have to put up. That is that we will guard that the pressure will not be put on the service providers. But I don't know if maybe Vlad or Benedict, some examples from the UK.
Yes, Ian, I think what you are referring to is the original Peterborough prison case, where in the evaluation that was conducted on that case, one of the important points that came out was this not directly pressuring the service providers so that they could actually get their more innovative and usually more holistic service provision model off the ground, have the time for that, and because in the end what matters there was the impact. So that means that top-down command and control interference with a short-term perspective, because some people might think that they know better how to do it, is something not to do. So that's also probably the discussions we had at some point about the role of the investor, where you have to be careful, because it's not necessarily correct that the investor knows how best to run the things, so and might actually interfere and work in a way that makes the model that people want to actually deploy not work anymore. So there are some risks there, and so there are a lot of assumptions behind how this is supposed to work that I think we are not always very clear on. So yeah, I think that's what you refer to.
Thank you all, and I can agree to that from our experience in results-based financing, doing projects in both social sectors and infrastructure. Insulating the service provider from excessive interference from funders is part of the success. At the same time, one needs to be mindful of monitoring and evaluating the progress, and striking the right balance there is the bigger question. I will move on to the next question. There's a question coming from Thomas Walker, and he's asking what is the interest rate on the bonds and how that was established, and how does the rate compare to the government's normal cost of finance? That is, what is the risk premium? Ian, I know that this project is being designed at the moment, and there are some of the aspects of it are more confidential. However, if you can still provide us an insight, give us an insight into this and to the interest rates and negotiating the social impact bonds.
I think the interest rates and the refund depends on the project and on the results that they are aimed for, and that if you see the social impact bonds now active, they all have a different kind of refund mechanism, and it's not one standard based refund mechanism with a fixed percentage that can be refunded. And for the question, how does the rate compare to the government's normal cost in finance? That's a good question, because the normal rate costs are actually there, whether there is success or no success. And if we apply the social impact bond mechanism, the government cost will be only be made if it's successful, and the project will be successful, and the social problem will be solved partially or completely. So about the rate, the government costs that will be made, that's only the cost that will be made is the big. I always say that the biggest risk we take from VDAB is that the project is successfully, because then we will have to refund the investors. Otherwise, there will be no risk involved for the government, the taxpayer, or the VDAB.
Thank you. If Thomas has more follow-up questions, you can type it in the chat. And then I will move on to, in the meantime, I'll move on to the next question. There's Bernard, who is wondering if SIBs can be applied to infrastructure sectors. And I'm going to ask if any of you is familiar with SIBs and infrastructure. From my research and what I know, SIBs are designed to tackle social challenges. But there's a wide range of results-based financing instruments used for infrastructure, and GPOBA in particular has tested output-based aid extensively. But if any of you wants to add to this, if you're familiar with SIBs and infrastructure, please step in now. So, but if not, then maybe it's something for us to look at. One thing I wanted to announce is that we will try and hold additional events on social impact bonds, because the topic is so interesting, and a lot of people talk about it. And we'll certainly look into applications in infrastructure, SIBs or pay-for-success schemes. Yeah, go ahead.
The question I ask myself is, where is the social savings? Where is the benefit if SIBs are introduced in infrastructure? I don't see the actual link between performing infrastructure or deliver infrastructure and social savings that are made by applying this system. So I don't see the link between them.
A valid question. Again, something to look into. There are times when infrastructure projects, a lot of these infrastructure projects are brought into areas that are socially and economically disadvantaged, and as a result of connections to basic services, there are social effects. So it's something to research and see if those social effects were used as a premium for SIBs. But again, it's a topic that I'm not familiar. So we can research and come back in our future events. I will now read the next question. There are more and more questions coming in, so moving on. There's a question from Sylvester Bear, and he's saying the private sector is usually attracted by investments with high return, and it often makes sure the design of the operation or the service is done in such a way to achieve the expected return. Is it possible that the objective of return on investment impacts the quality and accessibility of the proposed services when using the SIB investment? So given the high level of risk for the service providers who are only paid when improved social outcomes are achieved, do you think SIB mechanism is attractive as compared to other investments with less risk? Have you noticed any use of guarantee instruments by service providers to mitigate the risk of losing money? Very good question. Let me see. Let's start with Benedict. Can you take this question?
Yes, there are a number of elements in this question. So the first element is that service providers do not have any risk. So I think this is a misunderstanding. So this is very different from output-based subsidies, for example, because in this case, the service provider has a guarantee up front that they can do the work as they think they should be doing it. The risk is for the investors. So they might not get their money back. That's a different thing if the service providers are not performing well. So this is a very different idea, right? So that's quite important to understand that. Now the other part, so basically they are guaranteed. The service providers have a guarantee that they can do the work for a number of years, well the time period that the SIP mechanism is going to operate. That has some implications. That means that SIPs are typically positioned as a funding mechanism for innovative ways of working that have already demonstrated themselves to be effective before. So they are not typically very well suited for starting up something that nobody has ever tried. So they've gone usually through some pilot projects or demonstration projects that have already shown that they can achieve better than, that they can achieve impact basically, that they can do better than the normal way of working. And then it's just a question of how we can fill that, because in many cases it's still too innovative, let's say, for the mainstream public sector to keep it going. And we might just want to do that anyway, and then we are looking for other ways to fund it. That's a bit the idea behind it. So or at least the way I'm thinking about it, and that I'm positioning it also in the publication that we have put forward. But in a sense, again, Ian's project is about finding out if that's correct or not. So, but that's also something that we find in quite a bit of the literature.
Thank you, Benedict. I am moving on with more questions that are coming in. A question for either of you, Benedict or Ian. Thomas Walker asks, can you give some examples of the premium to investors? I'm trying to get a sense of how attractive this financing is to governments, given the uncertainties of outcomes for the investors. So there's still the question of how attractive is such a scheme to investors who may get higher benefits, higher returns from other types of projects. Your opinion, please.
Okay, if I understand the question well, it's how the investor get paid or get the premium investors. And I for example, the first social impact bonds in Brussels, there was how the refund was conceived was that a higher employment rate among treatment than the control group made that the investors were repaid their investment. And how? I read even improvements in re-employment rates in comparison of the control group is between 0 and 10%. Payment gradually increases from 0 to 100% of investment principal. If improvement is beyond 10%, investors earn incrementally higher interest up to 6%. So the maximum return is up to 6% at the end of the project. That's one example for the Brussels social impact bonds yet in action.
All right. Thank you. Thomas, keep asking if you need more answers. There's a conversation that started in the chat that originated with a question on SIBs and infrastructure, and now we moved on to green bonds there. Very interesting conversation, deserving of a separate event. Let me see if there are any other questions that our participants have. It looks like we've addressed them all. If there are no more questions, and given the time, I'd like to then proceed with concluding the event. All other questions can be asked either here or on our page on the OBA RBF Community of Practice. You will find a link on our gpoba.org website. I'd like to thank all the participants for joining us for this event. Special thanks to Jan, who presented the youth employment SIB in Flanders, and to Benedict and Vladimir, who helped us develop the topic. Let me remind you again that you can post the questions and continue the discussion on the Community of Practice website. We've recently launched the Community of Practice website, and it will give you an opportunity to collaborate with the webinar presenters and participants beyond the event. And you may join this website after we close this event. There was a link before starting the event. And with this, we will close the webinar, and immediately on your screens, you will have a feedback survey popping up. Please complete the survey before signing out. We'd greatly appreciate your feedback. It helps us improve future events. Thank you again to all of you for joining.